Coming up on Network Africa, Zimbabweans bid farewell to the People's General Morgan Tsvangirai as he is laid to rest. And at least 17 people die in Mozambique as a dump site collapses. And uncertainty in Ethiopia over a new wave of protest and state of emergency. It's good to have you on the program. I am Bisi Adebayo. We begin in Zimbabwe, where thousands of people bid farewell to their leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, the man whose career was defined by his rivalry with former President Robert Mugabe, has been laid to rest at his rural home in Buhera. Party faithful converged on a square in downtown Harare to celebrate the founder of the nation's opposition party, Movement for Democratic Change, who was described as the People's General. The newly elected interim leader consoled the people by assuring them that the causes for which their late leader fought for would not pass away with him. Mr. Tsvangirai died on February the 14th at the age of 65 after a long battle with cancer. Meanwhile, in Kenya, aviation officials have allowed 2 opposition figures to fly to Zimbabwe after detaining them at an airport overnight. Senator James Orengo and financier Jimmy Wanjigi plan to attend opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai's burial, but officials barred them, saying the pair failed to present a court order overturning an existing suspension of their passports. Both men are strong supporters of Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga, who inaugurated himself as the people's president last month. Unlike Mr. Orengo and Mr. Wanjigi, Mr. Odinga was allowed to fly to Zimbabwe without any difficulties for the burial of his longtime friend, Mr. Tsvangirai. In other stories now, South Sudanese rebels have released 2 Kenyan pilots who were captured more than a month ago after their aircraft crashed. A spokesperson for the rebels says the Kenyans were freed after an insurance company paid more than $100,000 in compensation for the death of a civilian killed when their plane hit the ground. After more than a month in captivity, Captain Pius Franklin Njoroge and co-pilot Kennedy Shamala are reported to have arrived safely in the South Sudanese capital, Juba. The pair were seized early last month when their plane crashed in the Upper Nile region, reportedly killing a woman and livestock on the ground. Now here's a sad one, as at least 17 people, including children, have been killed in Mozambique's capital, Maputo, and many more injured after a huge mound of rubbish collapsed. The pile of waste, some 49 feet high, gave way during heavy rains yesterday. The dump is known to be home to some of the city's poorest residents who build makeshift camps amid the rubbish. 5 homes on the edge of the dump were also crushed in the disaster as rescue workers continue to search for survivors. Uncertainty looms in Ethiopia as the state of emergency extends to 6 months following Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegne's resignation. Mr. Desalegn, who said he did it to pave way for reforms following years of violent unrest, is the first prime minister in the country's modern history to resign from office. Let's go to Ghana now, where the President Nana Akufo-Addo has opened the first meeting of talks between representatives of Togo government and members of opposition in Lomé, the country's capital. The talks are aimed at finding lasting solutions to the lingering political crisis in the country. Political tensions have deepened in the former French colony in the last year, with a number of violent protests staged mainly in the capital, calling for the removal of the 50-year ruling family dynasty in the West African banking and transport hub intensify. Protests were triggered by President Faure Nyasimbe's refusal to give a clear date for stepping aside and opening up political space in the only country in West Africa that still does not accept presidential term limits. Now let's get the conversation talking about the dam collapse in Mozambique. We have a guest, and that's the former Managing Director of the Lagos Waste Management Authority, Ola Oresoye. Glad you could join us on Network Africa. Now, many would ask, how is it even possible that the collapse of a huge mound of rubbish could lead to this unfortunate incident in Mozambique?
Well, thank you very much. When you look at the dump site, and that's where dump sites are quite different from landfill sites. Dump sites are accident actions. You know, they're not really designed properly, and when you dump refuse in a haphazard manner, whereby you're not, it's not fully arranged, then you can have failures. It's like just a building collapse when you have not properly structured. So dump sites, when it's not properly sloped, that you can have such collapse. When you have what we call the runoff, that's the kind of level of precipitation of rainwater. And if you cannot channel that water properly, then you can have such collapse. So I think that's exactly what happened in Mozambique.